Hello and welcome back. And that is right, today I want to return to the subject of HexOS. I want to talk about the new release of the software in beta, what it can do, what it can't do, and whether you should jump on the bandwagon yet. Now, I'm recording this video in December 2024. Hopefully nothing about what I'm wearing will date this video horrifically later on. And I'm going to be guiding you through the installation process, showing you, the dashboard, what is there at the moment. We're also going to be going ahead and installing it on this, a Ralph Witt 4-bay NAS. It's an i3 8-core processor there. We're going to install 3 hard drives inside. Those are 4TB Seagate iron walls, and that's because we want to test expandability down the road. The deployment has taken place via a USB, and we're going to go with a quick installation. It was very, very straightforward. We downloaded the assets online, which is a modified TrueNAS ISO. Once we got that downloaded, we utilized a bit of software to pop that onto a USB. You could use Blancher, or you can go ahead and use Rufus, either one of those, to allow you to put the installation onto a USB. Then we went ahead and KVM'd into this keyboard, video, mouse, into this system, and installed it just like we would TrueNAS normally. This was seemingly a modified ISO that had the overlay, or at least the communication with the HexOS remote server really there. And then we went ahead and restarted the system. So why don't we hop onto that installation now? Now that the installation media via USB has done its job, we can go ahead and disable that KVM output and now go into our web browser. And as you can see, going into the hexos.com dashboard, we're able to see that we've claimed our new server there, or at least we're ready to claim our new server there. Now, one of the other things, of course, is at any point we can take our IP, as mentioned earlier on, and if we enter that into the web browser, we can access TrueNAS Scale there if we choose to. Now, obviously, the whole point of HexOS is that we shouldn't need to do that. We want to be able to do this in the most user-friendly way possible. But there's definitely a vibe throughout the whole of this software that there is parity, giving you an exit into TrueNAS Scale when you feel competent enough to do so, or if there are configuration changes that need to be made that are not quite ready or not quite featured, at least in HexOS right now. So that's something to keep in mind. But for now, let's go ahead and claim our new server. We enter the admin password that we created during the TrueNAS/Hex modified ISO installer, and we go ahead and move forward from there. After that, it should analyze our system and find out what hardware we've got connected and ultimately what we can do with it. As you can see, we've got those 3 4TB drives there. We're keeping back a drive to test expandability later, and the USB drive, of course. On top of that, we've got the i3 processor along with the 8GB of memory, and it does make recommendations towards what this hardware is going to help us be capable of doing. Again, it's very hard to find out right now what the changes to this will be without testing multiple different servers, but at the very least you can definitely tell that it can notice that I'm running a CPU at least that has integrated graphics. Clicking continue, we can have a look at the storage pool functionality. Now this is where it's going to scan the storage media that we have. In this case, it's seen those 3 drives, and from there it's gone ahead and said we're going to set you up for a 1-disk redundancy there. Now keep in mind, maybe if this was a 12, 16, 24 by rack mount server, perhaps it would make recommendations towards a 2-disk failover there. But at least for now, we're going to leave it at what it recommends. Why? Because mainly right now, there isn't an option for manual configuration. Down the line, you will be able to set your own configuration. Perhaps if you do want to go for a 2-disk fail, or maybe even a RAID 0 if you're feeling bold. But the whole point is, as we've said time and time and again, that this is about keeping things simple. The majority of users that this is aimed at won't know terms like storage pool, volume, VDEV, RAID 0, RAID 1. They just want storage, and that's it. So we're going to go ahead with the recommended storage pool that it wants to create. We need to give our server a name. Again, I've done some experimenting. I'm going to reuse that name, Hex NAS Compares, and we're going to know that these drives are about to be wiped. All of this is fairly standard. And then we're going to complete our setup. Now, it's worth keeping in mind, if you are an existing Synology QNAP TerraMaster ASUS user, handholdy wizards like this one are going to be very commonplace to you. Why is that? Because you are on a paid platform where they are throwing a lot of money at keeping it as straightforward and as easy as possible. Whereas platforms like TrueNAS Scale and TrueNAS Core and even Unraid are phenomenally complex, at least at the storage setup. They've got easier over the years, but I would say for the novice, they are still nowhere near what I would call idiot-proof. And that's where this is trying to slide in the middle. But let's continue on to the dash. Now, as we can see with the dashboard here, it's immediately loading into here a window for a setup wizard. It's asking us if it wants to help create and configure new users, create folders. Again, typically we would refer to those as shares if they are going to be folders accessible outside of the system, by remote connected users or network connected users. And of course, the app catalog there. We come out because we're going to go back into this later. And if we go into the settings options here, not only have we got the option to revisit that setup wizard, I'm hoping more options appear, but we can critique and analyze some of our network setup, whether it is that we want to bridge some of our connections there, or perhaps on that initial setup menu, see notifications of our setup and what's going on in the background and things we might want to be aware of. It's still pretty limited right now in terms of what the system is telling us because, frankly, HexOS doesn't have a tremendous amount of control right now in its early beta phases. And, as mentioned, at any time you can access TrueNAS directly via that one click, which will open out into a new tab. And then from that tab, because we're accessing it locally, so therefore the browser is going to highlight you're not using a encrypted protocol there, you can go ahead and then access TrueNAS Scale as you normally would with the remote credentials you created during setup. For those that aren't already aware, it's TrueNAS_admin and whatever password you've set up there. But if we make our way back onto that main dash, we're able to see a little bit more information about the system server health, the processor there, what the CPU is doing and not doing, the memory, and the individual network connections there. But I will highlight again, this is designed to be as untechy as possible, and therefore I'm trying to bite my tongue a lot when I say there is not a lot of information here. But again, that's the point. Also, I think it's worth highlighting, I'm not sure they were completely ready for the sheer number of users that were going to hop on this beta early doors. Again, this is part and parcels with betas when too many people access it at the same time, but it looks like that is something they are working on there, and if anything, it's a positive sign that people are taking the time to look into this beta. However, the HexOS server being overwhelmed there, leading to access issues on the server, does kind of lean in quite heavily into that whole need of a local access point, not just using the web GUI. Here's me using advanced IP scanner. There's the TrueNAS server that we've set up with the USB setup there that we've done before. And if we access it via that IP, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, I can add in the credentials that I created, and I can still access this TrueNAS Scale server here. Just zoom out a little bit there. Now, again, HexOS is quite clear about this. You're still able to access the server locally, but it's just a damn shame that I can't access some of the more user-friendly features of HexOS, particularly when it comes to setting up the device for the first time. But moreover, long term, if I lose access to the web GUI, it is going to be paramount that at launch they have some kind of local-based access. They've said that that is on the roadmap for version 1.0, but right now, I would feel a lot more confident if that was available at least in the beta in some shape or form. Additionally, it's worth highlighting that when I did do my very first installation using this software, I encountered a not dissimilar issue to a lot of other users that simply could not get the software to create a storage pool. And in order to resolve that issue, I had to go ahead and directly interface into TrueNAS and then wipe the drives directly using TrueNAS Scale's own WipeFS feature. Once I did that, I was able to create the pool as normal. But it was just small hiccups like that that really kind of put me off. However, I'm pleased to confirm that I did create another HexNAS system at the same time as the other one, just to test out some different things, maybe down the road trying out that buddy backup stuff, and I'm pleased to say that that worked straight away. All three of the Kingston DC600 SSDs that I put inside were visible, and they were immediately bundled into that one disk failover there. And again, if you choose to and you've got other storage drives, you can create a secondary storage pool when needed in that second pool system there. Again, you will need to make sure you've got other drives inside, but at least you've got that option there. Now, when it comes to the kind of layout of your data, as you can see, we've still got to create some folders. So if I go ahead and create some folders and see how easy that is, so I'm just going to call that one media, make it accessible to everyone, and put it on that same folder. You can see down there, your folder is being created. On top of that, we can go ahead and create another one. It hasn't refreshed that tab quite quick enough for me. We refresh it there, where we see our folder. We refresh, there's our folder structure. Let's create another one. Let's call this one admin data. We can create a space, which is quite nice there. And again, we'll make this one private, put it on the SSD port and go ahead and create that. Again, later on, we'll hop into the TrueNAS Scale GUI, just kind of give ourselves a sense of kind of parity. If we go to the settings option there, as mentioned earlier on, we can open up a TrueNAS window there. And I do think it's worth highlighting just the difference when it comes to creating a storage area on these systems. As mentioned earlier on, we just had to guide through those individual steps when creating the pool. Whereas on the TrueNAS side of things, if you did want to create a pool, you would have to have gone into here. You can see it's now recognizing that pool that we've already put inside our system. But if we wanted to create a brand new pool, we'd go up to the top, we'd create ourselves a new pool. From there, we'd have to name the pool. From there, select the disks you're going to put inside. And there's a lot of optional stuff here that are more pro users are going to know what to do. But it's a little bit more intimidating than the simple select the drives, create the parity. So I know that's going to be appealing to some, if somewhat limiting to more veteran-minded users. So now let's move into the applications there. Now, again, Plex and Image are the only applications right now that are tailored directly in HexOS for that one-click installation. Let's see how it goes. Interestingly, it has highlighted, as you can see there, that the CPU that we are meeting those minimum specifications there. Now, had I not had one of these available, such as a single core CPU, perhaps there would have been interested to see if it would have prevented me installing it. But as you can see, it's going to be utilizing these locations, and it's going to require these permissions here. So it's going to be interesting to see if it creates those folders as it installs. So let's go with that one-click install. So now the download is finished and it's installing the file. I do think it's worth highlighting at this time, I do have the system on a very limited internet connection. I have a few test machines that do run on quite limited network and external access. So we're not going to critique this too hard in terms of how fast anything's installing, simply because a lot of this is going to do with my own local system network and outside access that I've tailored quite strictly. But now it's installed there, we can see if we go into the folders there, has it created a new folder structure there? And as we've created our new music, photos, movies, TV shows, all of that stuff, it has created those folders for us. Again, just to put that into perspective, on TrueNAS Scale, if we did want to install an application, we'd have to go down to the application center there. As you can see, it's already installed Plex. But if we want to go for other applications, we'd have to make our way into the repository and then from there select it. So if we go for something similar, let's go for MB, for example. We'd select MB, and then from there, we'd have to click install from there. And as you can see, as you would install it and click agree, you would still have to set up a lot of that container there that it's going to be going into. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still easier than it was in Core, but not by a significant amount. And then down there, when you click install, you may think you've installed it, but of course, you would have had to make sure you've got a lot of these configuration, creating those folders that you're going to need, because a lot of the time, these applications do not create those apps, create those app directories for you. So, fair play. However, as mentioned, it's only these two. If we scroll down and find, for example, MB there, and we try to install MB on this application, as you can see, it will direct you to go back into the TrueNAS Scale interface. So I don't know how many of these applications they're going to go for. Presumably it'll be based on popularity or demand, but it'll be interesting to see just how far they can extend this logic when you go to, I would argue, slightly more detailed and I would argue more invasive applications in terms of, directory access and permissions. Continuing on the subject of file management, let's see just how it's done. Let's go, for example, let's go in for the Photos directory here. Can we browse files and folders, or do we have to rely on a third-party client device to access it? So, for example, we can edit the name, edit access quite easily there. We can delete it if we choose to. What about if we click Browse? As you can see, we're going to select Windows there, and it's giving us the directory with which to access it, whereupon we'd open it up in a new tab. And now it's doing the kind of breadcrumb access point there. Now, I'm kind of disappointed that they haven't by default installed a native file explorer, given that in TrueNAS Scale, there is the easy application that you can access for file folder management there. So if I was in HexOS's shoes, I would definitely insist on a native browser-based file manager, because that is pretty much a consistent application in most turnkey NAS software solutions. And for a paid platform, that for me is a borderline expectation at launch. The settings section is, a little sparse right now. I will say you've got, for example, network management there, and you can bridge them together if needed. On top of that, you've got your management of notifications there, where you can find out just what's happening with the system, good and bad, at any time. And going back to the settings there, you've got that output into the TrueNAS Scout. You've got the option to restore the system if you choose to, disconnecting the server from your HexOS account or wiping everything. Again, if you do want to wipe everything, you have to type in both delete, and from there you'll have to go ahead and type in the name of your server there. Now, I kind of would have liked an admin password lock, because neither of those to me are black and white stop anyone doing it. That seems a little bit too easy to me. So notwithstanding that, I already wish there was two-factor authentication native to this, not just asking me to enable it within TrueNAS, but on top of that, the lack of two-factor authentication and the fact that I can reset the server all too easily without an admin password is kind of a bit of a concern, at least in this beta. A slight minor UI criticism here. I don't quite like the fact that the user tab is built inside the folders. Either create a permissions tab or create a users tab in settings. I don't think it's particularly intuitive that users is down there in folders. I've seen it a bunch of times, and of course, during the first time setup, you had that option to create it there. But down the line, if you were to add a user, I don't think folders would be the first place you would go. But creating a new user is really straightforward there. Create a user password and bung them in. There doesn't seem to be any permission rules that you can change at this time, and you can add kind of amend a few details there, but it doesn't have anywhere near the level of control and configuration, I would say, in terms of managing those users, rotating password control, that sort of thing. But again, this is a beta, this is launch. It'll just be interesting to see, after they've nailed down the fundamentals, what they roll in later. What about adding a new pool or expanding an existing pool? I've introduced two 4TB drives into this system, and you can see on the right hand side it's picked up the two drives and it's inviting me to create a new pool. Now again, as mentioned earlier on in the video, this has seemed to be a bit of a bumpy road with regard to this beta for some users. So for example, I found the drives in my system there, and I've made sure to wipe any existing partitions off these drives. They are completely partition free, they are good to go. I've even restarted the entire web UI for that purpose. So let's go ahead and create that new pool there. We're going to get these two drives and get those integrated into a mirror, and then I'm going to introduce a third drive that I have already wiped there in the background. You can see that third drive when I was wiping it earlier on in the shell, and this should allow us to not only see that new pool but also expand it with our new third 4TB drive, just to see if the expansion takes place. Down there you can see a new pool has been created. The UI will refresh in a moment to show the new pool. But this is something I've seen before, and something that has been reported online. Again, this is a beta, we can't be that hard on them. But if we go ahead and refresh that tab there, we can have a little look, see if it's picked up the new tab. Again, we're going to have that slight delay because we're relaying off the web server there, but if we chose to, we can go ahead and refresh there. And as we can see, the drives, there's our 4TB listed as HDDs, and we make our way in and our new pool is visible. So why don't we introduce that third drive now? Third drive is now in, so we can go ahead, select that pool and choose the option to expand. Keep in mind this is exactly the same drive as the other two in the array there, so there shouldn't be any problems with this recognising it's a similar 4TB Seagate Ironwolf and therefore allowing the expansion onto the new pool. As you can see, we select the drive for the expansion and click expand. Again, for those outside the know, you would not believe how long people on TrueNAS have been waiting for something that straightforward to happen. And again, this isn't just HexOS, this is just generally expanding TrueNAS has not been the easiest without going for cluster RAIDs. But nonetheless, we've got that drive in there. We can go inside. We're still yet to see it refresh. We're just going to manually refresh that page and just see what our results are. Again, forgive the slight delay. That's almost certainly to do with my internet connection, whereas if I go for local, we're going for there, it's absolutely fine. Doesn't look like it's been added into the pool yet, according to TrueNAS in the background, and that drive seems to be there. So again, unless this is something that's happening in the background, and again, we can go into TrueNAS here, have a little look at running jobs in the background, and it doesn't look like that drive attachment has happened. And again, keep in mind, if we go into the shell here and go ahead and list our drives, we can see that the drive now has acquired that ZFS part data there that's onto that disk. It's the F drive there. So Again, expansion doesn't seem to be quite as seamless as we'd like to see, but again, it's a beta. One more refresh just for good charms. We'll have to wait and see. At least now the user-friendly nature is there. One thing I had real difficulty kind of getting behind during some of the more recent updates, since LTT kind of put out his video about this software, I've got to say I'm not hugely in love with the whole deal they were putting out during Black Friday about getting a lifetime license reduced. Now, the actual idea of a lifetime license, I've got no problem with that. And even with Black Friday, we saw Plex, we saw Unraid doing it during the Black Friday event. But the idea of getting a lifetime license right now, at half even the early adopter price at $99 sounds good on the face of it. But on software that, to access a beta early, and the beta not being particularly feature rich right now doesn't feel great. And yeah, a full license, as you can see on screen, is going to be $299. So that's a substantial, 1/3 of the price you're going to be paying when this rolls out. But still, there was something about a $99 price point for a lifetime license on software this early in beta that I think did ruffle some feathers. And moving beyond just the beta, we've got to talk a little bit more about the future intentions of this project, not just outside of the beta, but beyond version 1.0. Now, fair play to them, they have already detailed their roadmap, and they do have a feature request section on their forum there. I think most users right now will probably agree that right now the beta does feel a little bit feature light, but as we move on to what they've got planned for 2025, we can see that not only are they trying to integrate snapshots and replication, something again available in the turnkey paid NAS sector right now, but on top of that, that local based access point, there's something I know we've hammered on about, but I know that is a real deal breaker for a number of you. Other applications to be featured into that smaller, easier one-click installation process there, and even more access to alerts and stuff like that. And then we move into the roadmap from feature request section. We're able to find out there's some obvious stuff, some less so. For example, two-factor authentication support per account. That was something that we didn't really see there, did we? On top of that, native Tailscale support. Let's face it, Tailscale is becoming quite fast a watchword. There is feature requests getting added all of the time, and because the beta is still quite fresh, a lot of these are getting voted upon as we speak. So if you do have any kind of thoughts and feelings about what you'd like to see, you can pop them in the comments, or I would recommend making your way over to their forum and entering them there for yourself. Right now, it's simply just too early to say whether HexOS is worth that price tag that it's arriving with. I do think it does an incredibly straightforward job of the first time setup of your system. I think it's taken a lot of the jargon that is built into a lot of these more complex NAS server platforms and pushed it way, way, way into the background where most novice users are never going to need to deal with it, while simultaneously giving you the option to flick over to TrueNAS Core whenever you need to use it. However, the lack of a local based access point is still going to be a sticking point for some. And I'm still not in love with the idea of that whole Black Friday early licensing fee. I like the idea of a lifetime server license. I like the idea that the software and all the future updates that will be included with it will be bundled into a lifetime subscription. But I do still think it was quite early doors to roll something like that out when this software is still so early beta. Again, more modified applications to be ready to go on a one-click basis within HexOS will be very, very attractive indeed. And although a lot of the setup is simplified, I think it is going to be something that's going to be a little bit of a higher hurdle to jump over when it comes to things like snapshots, those buddy backups that we already talked about, and virtualization down the line. For those, creating presets based on people's configuration is not going to be that straightforward. And once again, the need for a local-based access point and not of an over-reliance on the web GUI, I think is going to be paramount long-term. It's something that we saw in feedback when we did our Q&A with John P. And during the early beta stages, when we saw an overactive number of users trying to access the beta, as mentioned earlier in the video, we saw delays setting up our server. So therefore, imagine, that web GUI accessing via that dashboard being problematic when all of your local access has to go through the more complex TrueNAS scale. So therefore, they have already confirmed that they are going to be implementing at launch a local GUI access point, which again, whether it's going to be a downloadable client on on the system or something you can access via the web browser via the local IP is still yet to be confirmed. But until that is set in stone, I think the majority of users, probably rightly so, are going to sit on the fence about this. But what do you think? Are you the target audience for this product? Let's be honest, if you know your technological storage arse from your elbow, this may not be for you. But what about the rest of you that are just looking for simplified set up and forget storage, or just simply don't want to have to be the free in-hand IT handyman for your friends and family? Let me know in the comments below, and of course I'll try to put a link to where you can access this software when it rolls further out in beta as more and more access becomes available. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.